People across Texas are losing their minds over more than 2 million feral hogs, animals capable of turning an entire year of hard work into rubble overnight. These hogs drain $119 million from Texas agriculture every year, while the rest of the country mostly watches from the sidelines, some even laughing at their misery. But then, a quiet turning point emerged. Instead of fighting alone, several communities chose to synchronize trapping, hunting, and surveillance into a single, coordinated system. Rather than chasing hogs from one farm to the next, they began boxing them in. Within weeks, the results started spreading across entire counties. So, what allowed Texas to turn an agricultural nightmare into an organized war? Mystery Vault reveals the full story in this video. Feral hogs are not native to North America. Hundreds of years ago, the continent had no massive wild hog populations like the ones seen today. They were brought here by humans, first by European explorers and later by early settlers who released pigs into the wild as a form of mobile food for long journeys. Over time, some animals escaped, others were abandoned, and some were later crossbred with European wild boars imported for sport hunting in the 19th and 20th centuries. The result was the emergence of a particularly dangerous hybrid, large, intelligent, highly adaptable, and capable of reproducing at extreme rates. The southern United States, with its warm climate, abundant water, and vast open land, quickly became an ideal environment for their expansion, and nowhere has paid a heavier price than Texas, where feral hogs increasingly behave like an army, without uniforms, without borders, and constantly pushing into new territory. In 2004, Jane Norman was planting corn on his field in Fannin County. As he reached the end of a row and turned his tractor around, he suddenly saw something almost unbelievable. More than 100 feral hogs eating the very seeds he had just planted. Not from yesterday, not from last week. Seeds that had touched the soil only minutes earlier were already dug up and gone. Norman stood frozen, watching as the hogs moved in an organized line along the corn rows, tearing up each furrow one by one. In just moments, hours of labor and a significant amount of money were wiped out. This wasn't a random incident. It was the moment Texas began to face an entirely new kind of problem. That year marked the first time Norman's farm suffered damage from feral hogs. 20 years earlier, he had seen similar scenes on other people's land and thought they were rare exceptions. But now the problem had arrived on his own field, and this time there were no signs it was going to stop. From that point on, Norman was forced to replant multiple acres every year. Seeds, fuel, labor, and time were constantly poured back into the fields, not because of weather or disease, but because feral hogs had learned to recognize corn. Planting equipment they didn't attack at random. Instead, they watched planting patterns patiently, waiting until the tractor moved far enough away before striking. And Norman was far from alone. What happened on his farm was just a small part of a much larger problem spreading across Texas. According to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, farmers and ranchers in the state lose about $119 million every year to feral hogs, based on 2019 data. By 2025, when both crop losses and property damage are included, total losses have surged to nearly $500 million. The scale of destruction goes far beyond what most people imagine. This isn't just broken fences or trampled gardens. Entire fields have been wiped out overnight, forcing farmers to start from scratch. And the problem is no longer limited to rural areas. Feral hogs have moved into cities like Irving, where they've damaged lawns, parks, and even school grounds. In agriculture, corn is the hog's favorite target. They also damage soybeans and wheat, but the most severe losses consistently involve corn. To survive, some farmers have switched to milo, cotton, or other crops, but changing crops doesn't solve the problem, it only shifts the target, because the real danger isn't just the number of hogs, but their ability to adapt at an extraordinary speed. Norman tried every familiar method, setting traps, laying bait, using dogs to drive the hogs away, but the result was always the same. At best, the impact was temporary. The hogs weren't eliminated. They were simply pushed into neighboring fields, only to return once the pressure eased. That wasn't a solution. It was just passing the problem on to someone else. Trapping sounds effective in theory, but in reality, it becomes an endless loop. Norman knows farmers who manage to trap 200 to 300 hogs a year, yet those numbers barely make a dent. With their explosive reproduction rate, surrounding populations can replace those losses within just a few months. You're trying to fight exponential growth with isolated, linear efforts. Worse still, feral hogs aren't dumb. They learn to avoid traps, change their feeding times, and steer clear of areas that have been heavily hunted. Traditional methods simply can't keep up anymore. So why are people suddenly saying the feral hog problem might finally be coming to an end? Texas didn't discover a single secret weapon. What they built instead was a layered control system where each piece reinforces the others. Across the state, smart traps equipped with cameras and mobile connectivity have been deployed. Farmers set up large corral traps baited with corn, with cameras streaming live footage directly to their phones. Feral hogs move in to feed, completely unaware that every step is being monitored. Once the entire sounder is inside, the gate is closed with a single tap from anywhere. Texas Wildlife Services used this exact system in Irving when hogs flooded residential areas near Champions Park. Residents had tried electric fencing, but the real breakthrough came from precise, real-time control. No waiting, no guessing. Action only when the moment is right. The difference is scale. Traditional traps often catch just one or two animals or trigger too early. Smart traps allow operators to wait until the entire group enters, not picking them off one by one, but removing the whole population in a single move. The cost is significant. Initial setup can run into the thousands of dollars, plus ongoing mobile fees and maintenance. But compared to replanting 160 acres of corn at roughly $400 per acre for seed and labor alone, many farmers realize a smart trap can pay for itself after stopping just one disaster. As a result, neighbors often split the cost, sharing systems to monitor multiple properties. These traps also require patience. Hogs must be trained over 10 days to 2 weeks. Gates are raised at first to allow free feeding, then gradually lowered. By the time the trap is fully operational, the hogs are comfortable enough to drop their guard. Still, Texas understands one thing clearly: even smart traps aren't enough on their own. In fast-spreading hot zones, they needed something more aggressive, a tool that gives feral hogs no time to adapt. Some companies, like Healy Bacon, began turning helicopters into tools for invasive species control. At dawn, customers climb into multi-million-dollar helicopters, flying low over Texas farmland with heavy weapons, carrying out a single mission: track down and eliminate feral hogs, destroying crops below. Unlike deer, which tend to stay within limited home ranges, feral hogs are constantly on the move, and that mobility is their fatal weakness. No matter how experienced, ground hunters can only cover a few hundred acres in a night. A helicopter team, by contrast, can sweep across thousands of acres in just a few hours. In some cooperative areas, up to 400,000 acres from the air. Everything becomes visible. Pilots spot daytime bedding areas hidden deep in thick brush, identify movement corridors between feeding zones, and track hogs crossing creeks in terrain completely inaccessible to vehicles. This aerial intelligence gives farmers a clear picture of hog movement, something years of ground observation could never fully piece together. Hunts typically last around 2 hours and begin at sunrise, right at peak feeding and breeding times. Packages start at $4,000 per person. In Texas, no hunting license is required as long as the operation takes place on private land with the landowner's permission. The effectiveness is real, but even those directly involved acknowledge the limits. Aerial hunting is extremely powerful, but it cannot stand alone. It works best as one strike within a larger system where pressure is applied continuously from the ground to the sky.
And then, Texas approved the use of so-called war-grade poisons designed specifically to control feral hogs. This is not indiscriminate poisoning. It is a form of controlled chemical warfare, precise, conditional, and strictly regulated. Anyone authorized to use this method must undergo training and receive certification. Bait sites are required to be fenced off to exclude livestock and non-target species. The bait stations themselves are engineered as physical barriers, guillotine-style doors or magnetic mechanisms that require significant force to open. Raccoons, deer, and birds can't manage it. Only feral hogs can. But the key isn't the poison itself, it's how it's deployed. Instead of introducing toxic bait from the start, landowners gradually transition hogs from corn to non-toxic placebo bait. Only after the hogs have learned to open the feeders and eat safely is the poison introduced. The entire process takes 10 days to 2 weeks. The feeder doors are lowered step by step, forcing hogs to apply more strength each time. There's no rushing, no skipping steps. Patience is rewarded with results. Entire sounders, typically groups of 20 to 30 hogs, are eliminated in coordinated strikes. At the same time, researchers continue testing additional chemical options to prevent hogs from developing avoidance behaviors. Debate over environmental impact and animal welfare continues, but the data is clear. When implemented correctly, this approach removes hogs faster and more decisively than any ground-based method. Still, even with smart traps, helicopter hunting, and poison, Texas needed one more element before it could truly say the feral hog problem was locked down.
All of the solutions mentioned so far do work, but for years they kept failing for one fundamental reason. Farmers were acting alone. One farm set traps, while the neighboring farm kept hogs around for recreational hunting. One county launched aerial hunts, while the next county did nothing for feral hogs. That wasn't failure, it was a system full of gaps. They simply moved to wherever the pressure was lowest. Texas gradually realized that the problem wasn't a lack of tools, but how those tools were being used. A method that works on a single farm becomes meaningless if the neighboring land doesn't participate. All it takes is one uncoordinated link for the effort of an entire region to collapse. The turning point came when Texas shifted from individual action to campaign thinking. Instead of isolated efforts, control programs were organized at scale. Multiple farms, multiple counties, operating at the same time and using the same strategies. Pressure was no longer intermittent. Feral hogs no longer had escape quarters when entire regions coordinated night hunting, strategic trapping, and chemical control on shared schedules. Hog populations dropped quickly and stayed down. Crop losses fell sharply. Economic impacts began to reverse. Expensive technology was shared across groups. Red cameras used collectively redrew hog movement maps across property lines. Real-time communication networks allowed rapid response whenever herds shifted direction. Border areas where hogs could still re-enter remained vulnerable, but even there, sustained regional pressure significantly slowed population recovery. And as more areas joined the coordinated model, the remaining gaps began to close.
As coordinated campaigns began to show results, Texas started looking beyond the immediate question, not just how to reduce feral hog numbers, but how to stop them from coming back. That shift brought a very different idea onto the table: reproductive control research. Programs are now developing methods that render feral hogs infertile by directly targeting their hormones, affecting both males and females without killing them. Instead of short-term sweep operations, sterilization causes populations to decline gradually through natural attrition. No reproduction means no rebound, cutting off the cycle of trapping, shooting, and explosive population recovery at its source. The biggest challenge isn't the concept itself, but implementation. How to deliver contraceptive bait to enough hogs across vast areas, how to prevent non-target species from accessing it, and how to measure effectiveness when individual animals can't be counted. These questions are still being worked through, but Texas has already begun investing, recognizing that physical removal alone can't solve a problem involving millions of animals. At the same time, thermal imaging technology is making night hunting overwhelmingly effective, allowing hunters to locate and eliminate entire sounders in a single operation. Surveillance drones map movement patterns, identify bedding areas, and pinpoint choke points, turning wildlife management into a multi-layered tactical problem rather than a simple hunt.
The results appeared much faster than many expected. Areas once considered untouchable hotspots began to change after just weeks of sustained pressure. In Irving, where feral hogs had been roaming near Champions Park and residential neighborhoods, the combination of smart traps, electric fencing, and coordinated hunting nearly eliminated their presence. Places that once showed daily signs of rooting became noticeably quiet on J. Norman's fields. The difference was even clearer. Damage didn't disappear entirely, but it dropped to a manageable level. Instead of replanting hundreds of acres in a single season, losses were limited and localized. Thermal night hunting during planting season helped stop damage before it spread, rather than reacting after fields were already destroyed. Across Texas regions, using coordinated multi-method controls saw hog populations drop by 60 to 70% within 2 years, with crop losses falling accordingly. At the same time, a new industry emerged around feral hog control, from smart traps and thermal equipment to helicopter services, operator training, and carcass recovery and processing. What was once seen only as an economic burden began evolving into a system that creates jobs, revenue, and long-term control at scale. Conclusion: the fight against feral hogs in Texas makes one thing clear: there is no single silver bullet capable of solving a systemic problem. Only when technology, strategy, and people are connected into a coordinated network does the balance truly begin to shift. From smart traps and aerial hunting to chemical control and reproductive management, Texas isn't just reducing damage, it's redefining how large-scale ecological risks are managed. If you want to keep exploring the hidden battles, technologies, and systems shaping the modern world, don't forget to like and follow Mystery Vault.